I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about motivation. A lot of times when I meet people and we talk about what I do for a living, they say, "Oh, you're a motivational speaker." They always give me that title. I don't give myself that title because I always have to tell them motivation is an inside job. You know, if we would call me anything, I'd say maybe an inspirational speaker. Share some of my life experiences with you. Maybe help you relate a little bit, and maybe you can decide to get up and do what you need to do, motivate yourself. I remember being a young boy. I was about 8 years old, fourth grade. I used to go and spend some summer days with my older cousins. And we were always doing something that would probably get us into trouble, like most boys do. And one night we went to these sisters' house because their parents were supposed to be gone for quite a while. And one of my cousins' best friends was with us. Like I said, I was much younger, but I always wanted to hang with them because it always seemed like it was fun. Even if we got in trouble together, at least we had fun doing it. I had somebody to play ball with. I had somebody to fight with. And, normally when you play with the older kids, you get a little bit tougher, and so that helps. Well, we went to these girls' house and weren't there for a long time when a car pulled into the driveway. And of course, you know who it was. It was their parents. And they told us, well, they're going to come through the front door, so we're going to let y'all out the side door. Well, when they opened the side door, guess where the parents were coming in? The side door. And since I was the youngest and the smallest out of the four, I was the last one out of the house. And by the time I got to the door, the father was standing right at the door. Well, what most people don't know, I used to run track, but I ran track then, and I was a track star that night. I broke the 100-meter dash record that night. They just didn't record it because, the cameras weren't there. And I never know what happened to those sisters, but I never went back to that house. I have no clue if my cousins ever did. So we were motivated to get out of there so we wouldn't get into trouble. Now, we're pretty certain that the sisters got into some type of trouble, but we were motivated to get out of there. Another thing that happened to me was when I got to the University of Houston. I got hurt my senior year in high school and received no scholarship offers athletically. And even though I was an honor student academically, I received no academic offers either. I had some of the top private schools and Ivy League schools recruiting me, and as some of you know, well, I don't know how it is now, but back then, some of those schools didn't even offer scholarships. And it was real expensive to go there back then, and I knew my parents didn't have the money to send me there. So I had decided that my athletic career was going to be over once I finished high school. And as I went to the University of Houston for registration one day, I decided to stop by the athletic office and talk to the football coaches. As I talked to the coach, he told me he knew who I was and to come out and report on a certain day, which was the day when new freshmen and junior college transfers reported. I was excited at the prospect of getting another chance at football. The day I reported, I met guys from all over the country who were heavily recruited and some who were not. I had originally played one season at middle linebacker in high school. And the only reason I ended up at middle linebacker then was in 1985, Texas had a governor named Mark White who created something called House Bill 72, which said if you didn't maintain passing grades in your classes, you couldn't participate in any extracurricular activities. Now, I don't know why, a governor needed to put that in place. That's something the parents should have had in place already. But that's a whole nother story. And I also spent some time as a backup tight end throughout my high school career because most of my time was spent at defensive end throughout my college career. When I arrived at the University of Houston, they said they were going to move me to outside linebacker. And the first problem with that is I weighed 197 pounds. and most college linebackers during that time were about 220 to 240 pounds. I mean, we actually had an All-American at U of H who was 240 pounds and ran a 4.3 in the 40. And, at U of H a while back. There was a little get together for some of the athletes, and he said he's still pretty fast, but he can't make any lateral moves, which is why his professional career was cut short. So that was the second problem. My 40-yard dash time was about 4.5, before my knee got hurt. And so when I got to U of H and I ran in the 40, my time was a 4.7. Well, if you're running a 4.7 at linebacker, you have to have great instincts because you're not fast enough because you have to cover receivers and things like that. And so I'm still nursing a bad knee. So my speed, I had to compensate for another area. And as I said, I'm smaller than the guys I'm lining up against every day. And the next problem that came in, U of H was already stacked at the linebacker position, all three positions. And four of us came in together as new freshmen that year. So in essence, you might say the odds were stacked against me. Once we were all assigned jersey numbers, I was even more deflated. My jersey number was 103. And as most of you know, jerseys only have 2 digits. My number was 03 with a white piece of tape attached in front of the 0, which is what I was feeling like, a 0. I was seriously wondering to myself, had I made the right decision by going out for the team? I decided I wasn't a quitter, so I said I was going to make the best of the situation. I thought daily about putting on that jersey number and how little respect they had to have for me to even give me a jersey like that. I hated that jersey number. I was upset with the coaches for giving me that number. I was upset with the players that got better numbers than me and the talent wasn't there. I had this inner drive in me that said I'm going to show them that they made a mistake giving me that jersey. One day I came to my locker and there was a Post-it note saying your new jersey number is 91. I felt great. I felt I had accomplished something great. I had been motivated by a piece of tape. Now it also needs to be said, another guy who was wearing number 91, new number was 103. But that wasn't my problem. It was his. But I did say once that jersey number became mine, I said this guy will never, ever get this jersey number back. I knew that much. I remember visiting my old high school and my former head coach at the high school, and he told me he heard I had made the team at University of Houston. And, some things happened, and, I found out later that, some scholarship offers did come, but he never gave them to me. But that's a whole nother story in itself. So I told him, yeah, I made the team. And I also told him I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. And see, you can't tell a winner something like that. When you have a winner's mindset, you automatically think you're supposed to qualify some things if you put the work in. And that's just the way winners think. Quitters don't think that way. And I found out years later that they actually cut players at the college level. Well, in all my experiences, when you went out for a team in anything, you didn't get cut, with the exception of basketball because they only carry 12 players for the most part. But football players never got cut. Then when you get to the professional ranks, they thin them out because they carry between 45 and 55 players for the full-year roster. And, then they created the practice squad later on. But I didn't know they cut players at the college level. I did notice that a lot of my former teammates were no longer on the team, and I thought they had just quit. And some probably did. I just knew quitting wasn't in me. When I played Little League football, I played on the offensive and defensive line. In my first year, my jersey number was 90. I noticed something real quick. The guys who ran out at the front of the line doing name announcements always got to run out with the cheerleaders. Well, there were not enough cheerleaders to make it to the back of the line where I was. Well, guess what I did the next season? I told the coaches I wanted a number that was less than number 20. They never knew why, and I never told anyone either. I wanted to run out with some cheerleaders too. And the guys that normally got to run out with the cheerleaders were at the front of the line with the quarterbacks, running backs, and some receivers. And these guys were the highlight reels already. So they didn't need any extra attention. Us guys who were doing the grunt work were the guys who needed some kind of excitement. So for that season, I wore number 13 as a defensive end. Defensive lineman win number 13. The coaches tried and tried to get me to change my mind, but I wouldn't waver. Now, once that need had been met, the following season, I went back to my previous number. My sister and I went to elementary school, and there was a heavy rain, and flooding was all around our path home. The street we normally walked down had a little water on it, about enough to come up and cover the sole of your shoe, but nothing to get bent out of shape about. And my sister wanted me to go to another street because she didn't want to walk through that little water. And I joke and kid her about this all the time. And, I should never listen to her. But I told her the street she wanted to walk down, they were doing work on it. They were actually widening the street from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. And there was no concrete or anything. It was all just dirt, rocks, and mud at the time. And so I told her they were working on the street, and it's going to probably be worse than the street we normally walk down. And she told, oh, no, it's not going to be worse. And I told her if it was worse, she was going to walk through that water, and we wasn't coming back to this other street. And she said, okay, and off we went. Well, as you guessed, the street was totally underwater. And then she turns to me and says, let's go back to the street we normally go down, which is our normal route. And like I said, I shouldn't have listened to her, and even now I still shouldn't listen to her. Just kidding. But I told her, nope, we weren't going back to the other street. She was going to walk through the water that day. Now, I never told her I was terrified to walk through that water as well, but I had to show her about not listening to me. I was the oldest. Why did I tell you about this story? Because I knew in my heart there was no way I would let anything happen to my sister. I was motivated to make sure my sister and I got home safely through that water. Now what I should have did was I should have pushed her in the water. But I was motivated to make sure we arrived home safely. I worked for a large office supply company during my college experiment. I was the furniture department supervisor at the time, and I always sold furniture to people that I never had in stock. There was a store in downtown Houston that always had the furniture in stock because they never sold anything. So I would always call this store for a store-to-store transfer, and a woman would answer the phone. I always thought to myself, this woman sounds like she looks real good to me. I like her voice over the phone. And we normally know how something like that ends up. I could tell you a whole bunch of stories about stuff like that. She normally looks like, in a situation like that, a woman that has a nice voice over the phone, her face is normally good enough to be on radio. But at the time I was utilizing PBS, not the television station, the public bus system. So I knew I wasn't going to ride the bus over there to see what she looked like and then get disappointed if she wasn't up to my expectations. But it's amazing how things work out. At the time, there was a lady named Carlene that worked with me. Her husband was going out of town for a job interview, and the whole family was actually going to go on the trip as well, and she didn't want to leave her van at home while they were out of town. She asked me if I would keep the van for them while they were out of town, and she even gave me gas money for gas for the van because she felt like I was doing them a favor. I decided to go and visit this woman who had been answering the phone at the other store. I had my plan in place. If she was attractive, I was going to ask her out, and if she wasn't, I was just going to say, I just wanted to see who was answering the phone on the other end when I called her here. Well, when I first arrived and asked for her, the guy I asked looked at me kind of strange. Later on, I found out that he was interested in her heavily, and so here comes this new threat. When she came to the front, I talked to her, briefly because she was at work and I didn't want to intrude on that. So I talked to her briefly and I told her, I said, I'll be back tonight to take you out to dinner. And she said, yeah, whatever. And she walked off. and she's still pretty cut and dry. I mean, she loves life, but she means business. I came back when she got off, and I took her out to dinner. And you know, it's amazing. Her sister had told her to make sure that she drove just in case I was a serial killer or something. And I told her, I say, well, if I was a serial killer, it didn't matter whose vehicle we were in. So at the time I took her out to dinner, I didn't know she was seeing a guy who lived in California. So now that I found this out, my new motivation was to make sure that relationship ended in a hurry. And since that first date, that dinner date, we've been together over 21 years, and over 14 of those years have been in marriage. And for the record, I want to thank Carlene for this opportunity, because I never got the chance to thank her, because they moved out of town shortly thereafter. Later on, you know, a few years later, you know, I've always been a competitor. You know, I always like to compete. You know, I don't just compete to compete. I compete to win. And you know, I remember Vince Lombardi saying, you know, there's no place for second place in his book. He said second place is a game for losers. And you know, a lot of people might get upset about that, but that's what Vince Lombardi said, not Myron Jones. So I spent a few years bowling in leagues and tournaments. And I used to watch bowling on TV, and I was always fascinated about how that ball hooked and curved into the middle, what we call the pocket of the pins. I mean, it was exciting to see that. And so I knew nothing about bowling when I first started. The first year I bowled, my average was 168, and all I was doing was throwing the ball down the lane, and I was making it curve on my own. You know, I was twisting it with my wrist, and my fingers were sore. I had blood clots in my two middle fingers. I had blood clots in my thumb, and my fingers were just sore the whole year I bowled. Because when I bowled in that league, we started in September, we ended in May. You know, with a day off. You know, if maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's came around or something like that. But for the most part, you're looking at a 9-month span me bowling with sore fingers. So I was motivated to go out and find somebody to teach me how to bowl. And I found this guy named Marvin. I watched Marvin, and I mean, I really respected Marvin's game. And Marvin still bowls on the circuit today. The very first thing Marvin told me to do was go buy a book titled Winning Bowling by Earl Anthony, who was a legend in his own right. I mean, he was the first guy to make over $1 million in bowling, and Earl Anthony was a left-handed bowler, but most bowlers are right-handed, so he had everything taught in the book as if you were a right-handed bowler. And so none of the other guys I sought out to teach me talked about bowling. They just showed me what to do and helped me along the way. And, you know, I would tell these guys, I say, you know, can you work with me today? I said, and whoever loses, they'll pay for both of our games. I paid for a lot of games, so I was motivated to learn how to bowl, so I had to stop paying. So after that 3-month period of training, and I learned how to start bowling a little bit better, the next year my average was 185. And when I gave up bowling, my average was 208. I was motivated to get better as a bowler and even contemplated turning pro. I also learned what the averages meant. With 168 average, I was told you strike every now and then and you occasionally pick up a spare. With a average in the 180s, I found that you were normally a solid bowler, but you normally miss single pin spares such as the 7 pin, which is in the left corner of the lane, or the 10 pin, which is the right corner of the lane. When I got my average got over 200, I found out that you were consistently striking and picking up your spare pins. This was actually taught to me in my first year. I sought help, and I watched it progress with my own self. I was motivated to get better. So what am I saying? We always have a reason for doing something in our lives. We have the right reason, and then we have the real reason. What I've shared with you today are stories from in my life that I consider the real reasons I did things.